Andrew Butow,
Jared McGrath.
we're back for another discussion.
Always good to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to have you here. So, something that's very topical today, and you hear a lot about it, and a lot of people write about it, is the subject of diversity. So, I thought we might have a discussion on it today, and let's just start with the most basic question in my mind. What is diversity?
Love the question, Jared. And I love the question for a very specific reason. Is I ask this question pretty much every single day of myself and the clients we work with. And it's interesting to see, particularly in the Australian arena, how everybody attaches different meaning to the word diversity. Some people I say the word diversity to, and they're talking about gender economics and gender equality.
Yes.
Other people, it's more the LGBTI movement that's emerging. Mm. And then there's other leaders I talk to, and it's all about sort of globalization and working across different cultures. Yeah. I'd like to define it a little bit differently though. So for me, diversity is all of that, plus a much bigger game that we need to be consciously talking about as human beings working in corporations. So diversity for me is not just limited to one sort of area. I look at it more from a human layer.
Yes.
And at that humanity layer, we can have diversity of thinking. We can have diversity of perspectives. So just think about yourself. You can be one person and look at a problem from multiple perspectives. That in itself is diversity of thinking. So I'm quite passionate about taking the conversation away from specific types of diversity and lifting it up to a much more human rights perspective, as well as a consciousness and intellect perspective, because that's where the real benefits are for organizations and individuals alike.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, diversity is really just all of us being able to act and think in the way that comes naturally to us, and it's just a society really being accepting of that. So how should we look at diversity, do you think? So with that sort of definition of diversity in mind, how do we look at it?
How do we look at it? So look, I think as individuals and as organizations and as cultures, I think there's a temptation to stick to what's comfortable and stick to what's normal for us from our models of the world and the universe. And I'm quite keen for us to start practicing a more growth mindset, as well as more flexible ways of communication and looking at different perspectives. And a good example that comes to mind is I worked for one of the big four in South Africa, where you can imagine diversity has so many different layers, and it is a business imperative as well, given where that society is going very quickly.
Yes.
In a good way. And we found that we had a lot of investment in diversity programs that were very specific. We had a gender diversity program, millions of dollars going there. We had an ethics and ethnicity, I never get that word right, but I'll just try. Ethnicity type of program. We also had generational diversity. And what we found is we were spending a lot of money on these programs and doing a lot of change and making a lot of impact. But when we actually looked at return on experience and started measuring whether that translated into behaviors, we found that it didn't.
Interesting.
So what happened? I know it's very interesting. So what we then made a choice to do was to start focusing more on communicating across differences. And looking at communication, saying that I'm different, but how can we create an inclusive environment where we can have conversations where everybody feels safe to be real, even if we disagree, even if we have vastly different perspectives and models of the world. And once we started implementing more communication style programs that didn't focus on one type of diversity sector,
yes,
the return on investment and experience just took things to the next level. Because everybody could still be different, but at least they felt safe to communicate and solve problems, as opposed to creating more differences through subcategories.
So very much an environment of acceptance and understanding.
100%.
So final question on diversity. What's next? Where do we go? Where's the market heading?
Very, very interesting. I think with hyperconnectivity, which we're seeing in social media platforms, it's very easy for the individual now to have a lot of clout and actually express that diversity. I'm loving seeing this emerging group of leaders coming up, even from grad recruit level, even from school level. We're seeing leaders that are starting to see the world differently to how we've traditionally viewed the world in organizations and as citizens of this world. So I'm seeing a lot of people traveling more, I'm seeing a lot of people sharing more and actually communicating it. And with that, I'm also seeing platforms of disagreement as well. And the real next step for me is, let's not hide those differences. Let's not be ashamed of those differences. And let's also not think I'm more right than you versus you more right than me. How can we start creating spaces, places, and organizations where we can bring our full selves to work, where we feel safe to be real, but more importantly, where we've learned the skills to actually communicate, whether that's online or whether that's actually face-to-face across these differences.
Yeah, and I think for me another important factor in there is the multi-generations as well. I think there's a lot to be gained from the older generations interacting with the younger generations, and each of those generations understanding and learning from what drives them and what makes it important. So I think there's some wonderful opportunity to continue bridging these gaps and all of us just working and accepting each other for what we are.
Absolutely, Jared. My personal belief is everybody, doesn't matter what generation, where you come from, who you are, everybody deserves a place in this bright, exciting future that we are heading towards, and I stand by that.
100%. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Jared. Great being here.
Cheers.